Last night, the committee of 4 men and one sharply dressed dog reconvened for what can only be described as the most distinguished meeting in football YouTube history. Melbourne Cup Week had us all in tuxes, bow ties, champagne flutes, and one dog somehow wearing a tidy fascinator. And after a long day of pretending to understand horse racing odds, we turned our attention back to the only real race that matters, counting how many clean sheets Arsenal have kept in a row. The numbers getting so high we might need a calculator soon. Between the fashion, the form guides, and the spreadsheets, we toiled and burned the midnight oil to bring you yet another list worthy of the winner's circle. So without further ado, it's time for Anton's Tears. Hello everybody and welcome back to Hotsport. Make sure you're hitting like buttons. Make sure you are subscribing to Hotsport. We are literally one subscriber at time of recording away from 600. So, hey, even today I get one extra sub. This sounds very nebbish. I will be very happy because it would get me to 600, which would be 400 away from the 1K mark, which would get us monetized, of course. So we're on the road to that goal. Every sub counts. And of course, make sure you're hitting the like button on this video and hit the QR code. Bring you to Fire Them Cans if you are interested in my Arsenal only podcast with Cal. He has now just returned, and we had a really good episode as well with some special guests the other day on Fire Them Cans, so go check that out. But now that we have finished with all the admin stuff, let's get into the tiers. It's been a long time, about 10 days or so, since I did last Anton's Tiers. Look, all cards on the table. I've been having a few stomach issues this week. Not to get too personal, but yeah, it took me a while to get out these tiers. But hey, we used to get these tiers out on a Saturday, and here we go again. Let's go. It's time for Anton's Tiers as we head into the last match week before, I think the last international break of the year. So after this international break, we really start to hit full throttle mode. But this is kind of that international break where you look at it and you're like, how is the table shaping? How are we looking? And so yeah, 10 match weeks are done, and this is kind of what the tiers looks like heading into this pivotal 11th match day. Let's start at the bottom. Dead last. By the way, we're using, as much as I could, horse race theming names for the tiers. And yeah, Wolves are dead last. And by the way, manager has now been sacked. I mean, that's 2 years in a row now where we've done that, Wolves. And I was actually looking at the table. They were on 3 points a year ago, and they managed to survive. So maybe it's not all done for Wolves. They're currently sitting at the very bottom of the table on 2 points. And yeah, look, I don't know if there was much to say. They got throttled by a Fulham team that was on really poor form at Craven Cottage. Had a man sent off, gone down to 10 men. And yeah, just things aren't looking like up at all for Wolves. They had one nice appearance in the cup where they scored against Chelsea 3 times, but it went for nothing because it got eliminated from that too. So I think we move on from this. Yeah, Wolves dead last. They got a lot to go for. They're again looking like they're staring at relegation. But as I mentioned earlier, they were on 3 points last year. But I also need to mention that they were a little bit closer to the rest of the pack as well. So everyone else has started to fall away from them, and they're looking like almost a spot-on guaranteed relegation candidate. All right, next up, running on fumes. These two teams, by the way, they play each other this weekend in the Premier League. So maybe are we putting the loser in the Wolves category, or maybe putting the winner one up? We'll have to decide as we go on. But yeah, Leeds, they got destroyed at the MX last week. I mean, I've thought, I said this last week, that I thought maybe Leeds was one of the more likely teams to stay up out of that pack that I had. And they still could, but then they went ahead and made me look like a fool because Brighton destroyed them. And I expect Brighton to win, but I didn't really think that it would be so uncompetitive this match. So look, I think this is a huge game for both Leeds and Forest. And by the way, Forest under Sean Dyche last week, got to give him a round of applause. They came back from 1-0 down. Then they were 1-up themselves. They just held on for a draw after Ahmed got the equalizer. But you know what? Finally, there was signs of life with Forest. And again, I gotta say, I did kind of think that there would be a draw in that matchup under Sean Dyche. But this is a pivotal one going into it, ladies and gentlemen. Like Nottingham Forest again will be hosting Leeds at home. But this is a separator. This is a 6-pointer in terms of, you know, this bottom part of the tier, or basically bottom part of the table. Let's see. I mean, we will get into who I think we're going to win this when we hit on my later videos on Upset Alert. But we will have to, yeah, this is a bit of a separator here. Both teams, I think Leeds actually started off really well, and so did Forest to a little bit, and then obviously Forest has had the managerial up and downs, and Leeds are just sort of kind of coming back down to looking like that promotional side, that, you know, inexperience in the Premier League is starting to show for that group of players. Moving on, flash in the pan. I mean, all of a sudden, these two teams looked like they were, you know, as I said, they were in that tier below. And all of a sudden, I mean, Fulham absolutely spanked Wolves. Is this, look, I'm asking if it's a flash in the pan because I'm like, is this just because they played Wolves? Or are they starting to build a little momentum now? Like, again, the fixtures are only going to really start to reveal that, I believe, after this international break. So I put like kind of into a couple of categories here, right? You got this one, which is right before the international break, which sets you up nicely. And then you got that one back after the international break, because obviously, you know, you have to, it's always weird because teams are coming back from internationals and stuff. And then after that is like the run until New Year's and even beyond, and the fixture congestion, right? The Christmas period will be thrown in there, and we'll be playing a lot of football, and that's when we're really going to start to see what is consistent in this league. People are really going to start to show you who they are. These two teams this weekend, let's get to West Ham in a second as well. They were getting beaten by everybody at home. And all of a sudden, Newcastle United. And I thought, you know what? Newcastle would go ahead and do what everybody else has done away at West Ham. And this time, West Ham showed the cojones to put a stop to that. And they didn't just beat Newcastle. After going 1-0 down, there was a 3-goal blitz. West Ham looked like they've woken up again. But they've been so poor all season. Is it a flash in the pan? Is it just one of those weeks where they just look really good? Those answers are going to have to be revealed. And I think overall, like, I've come to this assessment that it's going to take like a few weeks up until like maybe the week after that international break, where we started getting into that run where we're starting to see what is real and what is not real in terms of form and consistency. Let's move up one more tier to the next one. Stuck at the dock. Now, this is not a horse racing reference, and that's because last week I called them passing ships. I thought they'd be passing ships. I thought, you know, that one was going one way, one was going the other way. It turns out when me and the committee went and sat down to do this, to these tiers, we put them in the same tier again. So maybe they're not passing ships. Maybe they could be passing ships, but at the moment they just anchored at the dock. They're just sitting there waiting, you know, chatting from across the way. They're like, hey, Burnley, hey, Everton, how's it going? You know, we're just here for a cup of coffee, you know. Let's see, because they're playing the two teams. Both of these teams are playing the teams at the tier below. So maybe both of these teams will have 3-pointers or all the way around. Let's kind of see. We're going to kind of shuffle the pack between the stuck at the dock and the flash in the pan, because those two teams play. That's what I like. Look at this. Fulham play Leeds. West Ham play against Burnley. Everton play Fulham. So like these teams at the moment are now playing each other. Of course, Wolves have got Chelsea. I don't expect them to stay dead last, but I think just kind of these 6 teams right above, between 7th bottom to 2nd bottom here on the tier, on like my rankings, they're all playing each other. So it's going to be interesting again. So things will be definitely, the picture will crystallize a little bit at the end of this weekend. But yeah, for Burnley last week, they lost to Arsenal, obviously, and I felt like Arsenal just took care of business and then held the fort. I mean, of course, Arsenal had a bit of injury issues going on, like Gyökeres had to come off at halftime, which was a bit of a maintenance. But Arsenal at this point, I feel like, are just, let's get the job done and then let's just set up shop, because they're just kind of trying to conserve energy for that, maybe as we're saying, that really critical November, December run-in where you have like this a lot of games coming at the same time. But Burnley they just didn't really offer much threat to the Arsenal, except for at the very end when Arsenal had to rush back to get the ball back to maintain that clean sheet, that very all-valuable clean sheet. But again, as I said, for the last few games, I'm not going to dock for losing to Arsenal. Arsenal, the most consistent team in the league, and there was an obvious quality difference between the two teams. For Everton, though, again, I think that bit of a back and forth game against Sunderland, a team that's also right up at the top of the league at the moment, and yeah, I think that's sort of their level, right? So they didn't really go up, really go down. A little bit of a sideways motion for both of these teams, in terms of being able to properly, evaluate them through the 10-week mark now. Up next, wild card runners. So for these teams, it's like I just don't know what I'm getting anymore. So funny. These are the same teams. We've been in the same sort of group for a few weeks here now. I keep changing them. One of them was like underwhelming, and then it was like, I've got the names of all the ones, but then last week I was like, like killers or whatever. What did I call them? Wait, I'll have to go back. Week 8, they were called, the same team was called I Still Have My Doubts. Week 9, I called them Giant Killers. So now it's the same one, different teams, wild card runners, because these Giant Killers, again, the very next week, after just saying, giving my apologies, these were the results. Of course, we already touched on Newcastle. I mean, that was disappointing. We have to get ready to get into them in some of my other videos, because their form was inconsistent. Every time you're like, come on, it's time for Newcastle to push on and start to put together a run, after that first win, then they have a disappointing performance. There's a lot of inconsistencies, and that needs to be called out, because one week Newcastle are beating Tottenham in the Carabao Cup, and then they come around and they lose to West Ham. Like, yeah, by the way, Newcastle were not in this group of teams, by the way, and the other ones when I had my doubts, so they're now added into them. But I have my doubts about Newcastle at the moment, about their ability to stay consistent. Like the talent is there. It's just they've kind of fallen back into this sort of group here. And for Villa, again, beat Man City, and then all of a sudden, went to Anfield and they woke Liverpool. I thought that was poor. Martinez, Emmy, you breathed life into Mohamed Salah. What was that? Honestly, that was so unnecessary. You guys were actually looking pretty solid, and then that happened. Like, you need to hold your head in shame a little bit with that one. And for Brentford, right? Killed Liverpool and then lost Palace. Like, I don't know. It's a mixed bag here. I like one you get one week, one's killing the other one. Sunderland went to Chelsea, beat Chelsea, couldn't beat Everton on their own patch. And yet they're still like top of the table, and we'll get to their matchup this week, which is Arsenal, which as an Arsenal fan, I'm a bit nervous about. I don't know why. I've just got this nerve because of all the line, because more of the fact that it's City against Liverpool on the other side of things here. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if then this week Sunderland put in a good performance. So it's like these teams are just, and I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle put in a good performance this week. Of course, Newcastle and Brentford play each other, so something's got to tell. And then, you know, who did Villa have this weekend? They have got Bournemouth. That's a toughie. But again, if they beat Bournemouth, would you be surprised at Villa Park? No. It's just right in the moment, I just don't know how to predict the results of these teams. Like, for instance, every time I think Brentford's going to get smashed, they turn a team over. I thought that United would smash them. I thought Liverpool would smash them, and those were their best, most impressive performances of the year. So I'm like, you just don't know. It's they're wild cards at the moment. Wild card runners. They could be anywhere. They could be last. They could be first. You just don't know. Next up, flying behind. Yeah. So for Brighton, look, I think Brighton is a little bit harsh because Brighton, as we mentioned, had a really good performance last weekend against Leeds. But again, you know, the week before they lost to United. It's like a little bit as well of that little kind of up and down wild card edge to it. But they're overall in the table, they're just a little bit behind the man. They're at 10th in the league at the moment. It's just that sort of consistency. And for Spurs, I thought they were somewhat consistent earlier, and now, like, you know, when they're getting put to the test now, their schedule, when they get a little bit tougher, it's starting to fall behind. Like, one thing I kind of didn't say on Tottenham is they had one of the easiest schedules in the league. Now they had Chelsea last week at home, and they're going to have United at home this week. They slipped up to Chelsea. That was a bad moment of concentration. Great play by Chelsea, by Caicedo, and by João Pedro to get that goal. But then again, they played really well. Mickey van de Ven, that run that he made against Copenhagen away from home. Was it? No, it was at home. It was at home. It was at their home. They've had some home cooking. Again, and the week beforehand, they went away to Everton and won. So it's like a little bit inconsistent form, but they're starting to maybe show a little bit of their true colors. Let's see how it looks against Man United. They've got a great record against Man United in recent years. But, like, let's see, because at the moment they're starting to fall a little bit behind. I had them on that sort of Chelsea, I even had them sort of that Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool sort of level at one point earlier in the year, and they're starting to kind of fall back into the team that they were to begin with a little bit. So they're a little bit flying behind, but again, these are like top 10 teams for me at the moment. So it's not as bad. They're just falling behind. We're starting to talk about the teams at the top end of the table. So they're falling behind those. But again, they're comfortably ahead of the ones I think that I've had below them on this tiers. For Brighton, maybe they're a little bit more, you know, in the wildcard runners tier. For Tottenham, they're a little bit more in the tiers ahead, but they're somewhere just kind of together here, grouped here. Next up, in the running. So again, I think these are teams that they have shown. By the way, I just got to give out credit to Manchester United here, because I think that, look, I know they drew against Forest, but results like that are going to happen. It wasn't a defeat. They showed some character into making sure it wasn't a defeat, and they got something out of that game. And beforehand, I think they won 3 in a row. And in that run, they had Liverpool, they had Brighton, and they had Sunderland. Look at where those teams are right now. Like, I know Sunderland are here on the bit lower on the tiers, but in terms of on the league table, they're top 5 in the league table. So, I mean, I'll take a win against Sunderland this weekend. And in terms of beating Liverpool at Anfield, that's phenomenal. And in terms of, you know, beating Brighton, who've been a giant killer this year, that was also really good. So I think, again, one drop point, all of a sudden we're starting to rewrite history again. And I said I'm going to maintain a little bit more faith in this United team. It's not all doom and gloom. And by the way, congratulations to Ruben Amorim and Brian and Burma, because they've won Manager and Player of the Month. Now, do I agree with those decisions? No. But it's an indication that things at Man United are not as bad as the narratives like to make you believe. And they're in the running to push for European places now. They really are. And so are Bournemouth and Palace. And I know Bournemouth came down to earth a little bit and had a little bit of a hiding away at the Etihad. And I think City have a tendency to do that, to bring teams who had good seasons a little bit back down to earth. But do I believe in the overall quality and the coaching that Oriola is doing and the quality of the Bournemouth team that they've shown so far? Yes. They're definitely still in the running for this. And of course, they've got another test when they go away to Villa Park now. I think that's going to be that's going to tell you a lot about Villa and Bournemouth in this game. Because Bournemouth is where we expected Villa to be, and Villa is where we expected Bournemouth to be. So let's kind of see if they can hold their ground here, Bournemouth. Because that's a tricky away test. A away test that Manchester City has just recently failed. The same Manchester City that thumped them last weekend. And for Crystal Palace, as I said, you can't judge anybody off the back of a defeat to Arsenal, especially with how well they defended. And then they hosted a Brentford team that was, on a good run of form, and they won. And Mateta's back on the score sheet again. And they're playing good football. They're showing how well coached they are again. Sometimes you just kind of, when they're playing the big boys, these teams, those aren't where I define the season. And I think that goes for both Bournemouth and for Palace when I talk about this. Like, this is a 38-game season. So, sometimes they're just going to get outmatched by some teams that are better than them, right? But Palace here, bounce back. They showed what they are. They've consistently been that way the whole year. And I expect Bournemouth to do so as well. Look, this, as I said, this is going to be a tricky one this weekend. But, what else can we do? Anyway, moving on. Lost a shoe. So, for Chelsea, the idea of lost a shoe is like they can be really, really good. It's like it's by the way, it's a racing term, by the way. So it's like they can run the race really, really well, and then all of a sudden lose a shoe and kind of trip up a little bit. And I'm not saying they tripped up against Spurs, but what I'm saying is like they can go ahead and beat a Spurs and then have like a shocking result the week prior to Sunderland, or maybe this week to a Wolves. Now, I'm not saying they are going to do that, but the reason why they are behind the teams, the contenders, is that they don't have the same sort of amount of consistency. Now, you can argue, hey, Liverpool's not on this list yet, and they showed you a consistency of poor form before. So what are we talking about? I just think overall, when I look at the quality of them, I still expect that 1 point for Liverpool to give me a run. I don't know if I'm ever going to expect Chelsea to give me a run. I think what Chelsea are is like a team that's really, really good, are going to show you some really good performances some week, and every once in a while you're just going to show you a hiccup that just doesn't make sense. But that once and so often is much more often than others. And that's kind of, it's a horse racing term, lost a shoe, just to kind of say that, they can just all of a sudden trip up when you don't expect them to. But overall, great win last week against Spurs. They got the job done. And again, they kept a clean sheet. There's a lot of criticism about Chelsea's defense in recent weeks, especially after that cup game against Wolves. But they set up shop there, right? But then again, right, here's what I mean by lost a shoe. Great win against Spurs away from home. Draw against Karabag, let's be honest. I keep saying Karabag. Everyone keeps saying Karabag. But that just shows you an illustration of what I mean about Chelsea. And now this week, they got Wolves, Do I expect them to go and beat Wolves? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look where I have Wolves on the tiers, and look where I have Chelsea on the tiers. Absolutely. Would I be surprised if they popped Whoppa Weirdo? Yeah. No, I would not. I would not. All right, let's get to the business stage of the tiers. Runners up. Guys, this is the big weekend, the big match, Liverpool against City. And I put the pressure on both of them to set up this weekend by both winning and staying really in the race. Because if they dropped points last week, as proven by Arsenal's victory at Burnley, at one point, Arsenal moved 10-9 ahead. Both of them were able to respond to maintain that gap. I think that's an important step to set up this week. And in essence, they put Arsenal under a little bit of pressure from this point of view. Arsenal need to win against Sunderland. If we win against Sunderland, we have all the benefits of moving ahead of somebody or both. If we lose against Sunderland, there's a risk of losing ground to somebody. And if we draw, there's the risk of losing ground to somebody, as well as maybe things staying status quo. So Arsenal really need to beat Sunderland this week. A team that's been so consistent, it's become a must win just because these two play each other. But let's move on to the City and Liverpool section of this tier and the matchup. Because as you see, when I put teams on the same tier and they play each other, what's the rule? One goes up, one goes down. And I think more specifically for Liverpool, if Liverpool were to lose this game away at the Etihad, after a good week of performances at Anfield, they got back to winning ways against Villa and they beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. That was a critical week of just kind of, this is where me and other people disagree when it comes to this stuff. The narrative sometimes is like, oh, Liverpool are back. Watch out. Where for me, it's like, no, Liverpool stopped the rot. They've gained some stability. They've got a platform for stability now. Now, if they beat Manchester City away from home, my tune will change. But if not, if they lose to Man City, it's hard for me to say. Again, I think I've knocked them out of the race a couple times. Over the last few weeks already come up here and said a couple stuff based on just, losing 4 in a row. But if they were to lose this and Arsenal were to win, Arsenal would grow 10 points ahead. I find it very hard to believe from that point that Liverpool have a chance to be in this title race. I know there are a lot of in denial Liverpool fans online, and I'm reading them and I'm seeing them trying to send threats and trying to, rile up my fan base and make them feel a little bit nervous that they're coming in behind. But the truth is, you guys have a big weekend this week against Man City. You shouldn't be worrying about us. You gotta make sure you guys stay in the race. But for me, like Manchester City, for instance, if they win, regardless of our result, they have established themselves as the team that's in the race chasing Arsenal. Now, it still would be a 6-point gap if we were to win and they were to win, right? Just like it is now. But the gap difference between them and Liverpool, we're sending Liverpool under the dust. Now, there's a 4-point gap between them, right? And it's sort of like Liverpool are out of the race, and it's going to be Arsenal versus Man City. It'll be a 2-horse race as well, to use the term. But at the moment, I feel like they're battling now for that second position. This is the battle for second position. And if they draw and Arsenal win, not much of a race now, is it? And I know I sound bullish, and I've been out on all the shows, pumping my chest about Arsenal, but that's just kind of because I understand the reality of the situation. This weekend is key. This weekend for me is like for all three teams, and we're going to touch on this on another video. But for all three teams, this is a critical weekend heading into the break. This is Judgment Day in terms of how we're going to reestablish the favorites and the second favorites and the third favorites moving into the rest of the up until the New Year's period, that Christmas period where people say is so important. You know, this is kind of like your reassessment time. So we're going to touch about the team, by the way, that is at the top of the tier. So I will finish off on talking about these two. This is your chance now. If Liverpool were to win, let me put it from that point of view, right? All of a sudden, you're sending City to the back of the line here, and you're saying, nah, we're back. We just defeated Manchester City away from home. And when we play them again next year as well, right? Because in 2026, it'll be in our house. And it's going to make City's season a little bit rocky. They would, with an Arsenal victory, they would fall 9 points behind Arsenal, which I don't believe Arsenal have ever stretched a lead as high as 9 over City at a time when Arsenal were in the, because I'm pretty sure at some point last year Arsenal did have a pretty substantial lead over City in the table, but Arsenal weren't first. I'm talking about when Arsenal were leading a title race. I don't think that it's been a lead as big as 9. So there's a pressure on both of these, right? If you both draw, you're both kind of, I think neither of you are really in it. At that point, it'd be 8 and 9. So yes, 8 and 9. Arsenal would gain 2 points on both. Somebody's got to win if you want to be in this race. If you want to be considered the second favorite for this, you're going to win. If you lose, I think your chances of winning the title are slim, because as well, you not just got one guy ahead of you, you got 2 guys ahead of you. Huge. But now, of course, at the top of the tiers, again, it's almost as if it's like clockwork. The Arsenal out in front. And look, guys, you guys gonna have to try to even score on this team. And there's a lot of people who have this feeling that Sunderland could this weekend. I don't know how to put my finger on that game, but I think we'll touch on that later. But let's talk about how Arsenal, the greatness of Arsenal, because now they're at the top of the tiers, right? 8 clean sheets in a row. That has tied a record for the most amount of clean sheets consecutively in Arsenal Football Club. That a record that was set in 1903, 122-year-old record. If Arsenal were to keep a clean sheet this weekend against Sunderland at the Stadium of Light, Arsenal would break. This would be the most consecutive clean sheets that Arsenal have ever kept in the club's history. Now, that's historic. As well, I didn't mention on last week's tiers because, of course, since then they played cup games. Arsenal went an entire calendar month without conceding a goal. That is the first time in English history. The defense is unprecedented at this point. And at the moment, yeah, we've got a little bit of an injury scare. And I think that kind of plays into why I'm a little bit nervous about the Sunderland game. But Arsenal has clearly been the most consistent team in the league and deserve the props. Like, the lead is big, and the signs of a drop-off are, I can't find them anywhere. For Arsenal to melt down, there are a lot of steps you have to chip away at to try to get us to kind of fall off of the form. First off, start to get more shots on target. Start to make Raya a little bit more busy. That's the first step. The second step is to actually score. And the third step is to score probably more than once, because Arsenal are probably going to score at least once, to hold on to a victory against us. So there's a lot. I just think that the Arsenal have just built up this solid foundation. The lead feels more secure because Arsenal are consistent and look secure. It's different when a team builds a lead, but yet, they're in basketball matches and there's a bit of an air of vulnerability about them that you can see. I don't see it with the Arsenal. All people are referring to when they say the Arsenal are vulnerable are past seasons. Everyone's like telling me that all the years of Arsenal, past years where Arsenal were off the table for a long time and couldn't hold on to it and bottled it. Just different teams. Like, if for guys, go watch back Six-Sided. We had this debate yesterday. And for me, it's just like, that's all you got now. Because this version of the Arsenal there's nothing you can say about it anymore. There's nothing else you can say. This is the best team in the Premier League right now. And yeah, maybe a little bit, there's a bit of an extra cockiness and coming from me, and it looks sometimes over the top. But the reason why I'm acting that way is because I have full faith that this team is going to remain consistent. Yeah, we might have some hiccups here and there, and there'll be some weeks where they'll be a bit disappointed. But at that point, Arsenal fans just got to stay relaxed. Because you know what I think? We might have one bad game. I would call it a hiccup. Then I think that the very next game, we would continue back with that consistency again. So when I say consistency, more often than not, Arsenal is going to show you what they've shown you, which is great defensive solidity, control of games from start to finish. And that's what it is. So again, massive week. We're going to touch on that in another video later on in terms of, you know, taking care of that Sunderland business first. I think it's critical for Arsenal. But right now, heading into the 11th match week, of the evidence that we've got so far, Arsenal are out in front. So big weekend of games coming up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think about the tiers in the comments section below. Like, do you think this is about accurate? Do you think that there are some teams that can move up, move down? Let me know your feedback. But guys, until next time, guys, enjoy the match weekend. And by the way, we've got some other videos that will also be coming out today as well, the regular ones, Under Pressure, Upset Alert, so look out for those. And until the next time, guys, Anton out.